questions are great. So thank you, lovely audience. And there's two that I'm going to ask together because they complement each other. And one is from Rosemary. And Rosemary asks, is there some way to convince the left brain that it's in its interest to cooperate and perhaps use the right brain, the end result being that we all benefit? And I think that really feeds into what you were just talking about. And this way of improving Western society, which is clearly tilting right through to the left brain. And it seems unless the left brain sees an advantage in sorry, I can't just read that a little bit, apologies, is not inclined to sort of take the longer view. So that's one of the questions. So she's saying that sort of short-term aspect of the left brain that you describe. And then Phil asked a similar question, which is, how can we go about balancing our two hemispheres? And secondly, how do we go about balancing a society that is weighted so heavily to the left hemisphere? We desperately need ideas and solutions, to quote Iain, before we fall into the abyss. So are there any positive solutions that you see that we could do on a personal and on a societal level?
Yes, it's not as easy as the following things we need to do, because nothing less than a whole change of mind and a whole change of heart will help here. But some fairly obvious things need to happen. The first is we completely misunderstand education. I think education has been dumbed down in my lifetime. I think it has been turned into an exam results way of assessing things, which depends on getting people to give the right answers. And that has nothing to do with education. It's not about learning the right answers and parroting them. You must be taught to think. And to think is to think of other points of view than your own. That's the very first aspect. So being trained to actually argue for a point of view that at the moment you don't hold, and to see the very strongest argument for it, is something that no child should ever leave school without having been trained in doing. Children should be taught to doubt all the things, not just given this is how you should think about this issue, but things should be debated, and if possible, different points of view put. We need to spend much more time and energy on training children to think broadly, culturally, socially. This is not a soft option. There is nothing soft option about philosophy or about understanding literature or learning, as I did, languages, that are not easy to learn. Actually having to put yourself in another person's point of view, see the richness of what a culture has been able to bring to bear on problems that we are now facing that will not ever be entirely new. We can always learn from the way other people have thought. So bringing the humanities back is important. I was absolutely bewildered by a remark that at the moment what the children need is to not be reading poetry. I've actually been for the last 100 and something days reading a poem every day on the internet because I think it's so important. Then I think that education should university education should not be a business. It should be funded by the state, and only people who really want to go to university should go. It shouldn't be just the automatic thing you do. It's become devalued. It's a waste of young people's time and effort to get a piece of paper that means nothing. It costs them money. It raises hopes that can't be fulfilled. Universities should be funded by government. They should not be in any sense dependent on private investors, and they shouldn't have to court students and please students. They are in the business of telling the students and things that are important for them to hear. They are not supposed to be being bossed around by the students. This is a completely bizarre state of affairs. And I put it down partly to the capitalizing of education. I think it's also one of the problems with education on the media is that there aren't enough independent elements there. Perhaps we can't have a centrally funded when we used to have something called the BBC, but it's sort of done the opposite of covering itself in glory over the last few years. So these audiences have crashed. But in any case, I think that there are things that we can do, but they won't be easy. There are no easy options. We actually have to apply ourselves. We have to do things that aren't rewarding to begin with in order to be rewarded later. In other words, something quite alien to our culture, which is, I want it and I want it now. And it's also my right to have it, by the way. Well, no, I'm sorry. Who says that? Where do you get that from?